Hello, everybody. It's Dave Neal, stand up comic and host of Bachelor Nation News. It's full on barrel scraping season here at Bachelor Nation. There is nothing resembling a storyline in the world of Bachelor content except for the Clayton Echard paternity scandal. But right now, we've got Ben Higgins dishing some tea about his relationship with Lauren Bushnell Lane. So we're going to get into that right now. He says he and Lauren were like work associates before calling off the wedding. Hey, that's kind of what it becomes, you know? It becomes work associates, and then, if you have kids, then it becomes some sort of other thing, but you have to keep the love life going. And it seems like maybe the relationship flamed out due to the filming schedule and just not being each other's right partner. Now, this happens all the time in the world of Bachelor. It just doesn't always happen when you're filming a reality TV show. So they had a reality TV show going. They realized how exhausted they were, and they weren't even talking when they were off camera. Okay, let's get into it. So let's take a look at this. And if you want any other content today, I'm going to be covering Vanderpump on the Up and Adam Live right after this at noon Eastern Time, 11 Central. That'll be available on Up and Adam Live. And then we'll have some other content after that, Patreon, and so much more. So you can go to patreon.com/Dave Neal to be a part of our private membership only stream. It's been very quiet lately with the world of Bachelor. But of course, these stupid stories always get press. Isn't it wild? You can't get press for things that matters, right? But these stupid, it's harmless. I get it. All right, let's have a listen. They were on the world famous Bachelor Happy Hour podcast. And here's what Ben had to say.
How long after the show into filming Ben and Lauren were you guys like, this might not be a happily ever after situation?
Good question. So they asked us to do a televised wedding. This was on the show. So Chris Harrison flew out to Denver. We kind of did this this moment where he sat down and said, "Do you guys want to have your wedding televised on national television?" And obviously there's a good paycheck associated with that. So you're like, kind of, if we're going to get married. Yeah. And we had already been struggling for about a month. So we were in couples counseling. We were really trying to make it work. But we were not doing it. I mean, we were button heads. And so we showed up to when he asked us, already kind of not talking. And we were kind of more work associates. Like, we were living in the same house. We weren't really speaking to each other off camera because the cameras would leave at 9:00. We'd be exhausted. I might have to go to work the next day. She would be doing her thing with her job. And so she was still flying as a flight attendant a little bit. And we'd just be like dead tired. We wouldn't talk to each other. We hadn't talked to each other really, truly in weeks. And so when they asked, we both went, I remember the car ride home. We were like, are we going to do this? Because if we're going to get married, we better do it on national television. Like, no question, right?
I mean, he's got a point. Look, if you're going to go through the whole process, get that bag, because a lot of relationships fail because of financial reasons. So get the financial reasons settled. But also, a lot of relationships fail because you put your own needs ahead of your partner's, which, again, you should to an extent. But for them, I mean, to have this mutual goal of filming the TV show, and she's also still a flight attendant, I don't think there's a scenario where the relationship could work. But this one for sure wasn't it.
Yeah.
And we were both like, I don't think we're going to get married. And that was kind of one of the final episodes. And so they were kind of done filming maybe a week later. We kind of tried to make it work a little bit longer. And then finally it was over. So I would say if they filmed for 2 months, about a month and a half into it, we were kind of calling it.
Oof, rough, man.
It was a
crazy time in your life.
Yeah.
Like,
it was
wow.
a weird time. It was a weird time because here's how it happened. So as soon as the cameras dropped, the next day I flew to Chicago for a business meeting. I was sitting in a hotel in Chicago, and I remember talking to her on the phone, and we were kind of talking. We're like, this is done. Like, we know this is done. Like this.
So let me get this straight. They both know it's over, and they were still filming their reality show, it would have been so much more interesting if they broke up on the reality show. Maybe they didn't have the incentive to do that. But also, did anybody, leave a comment, let me know, did anybody watch this reality show? Where did it air? I don't recall much about this. I mean, Ben Higgins, you know, he's from one of the highest kind of like rated times of The Bachelor. But it seems, I mean, you can tell that this obvious breakup with him and Lauren left a real sore spot.
We're not going to make this work. It's not healthy on either of us. We should just try to move on. And I said, here's the deal. I'm gone for a week for work. When I come back, you know, it'd be really great is if like you were gone, because I don't think I can see you in person. Like, it's going to hurt too much. Like, we both cared that much still. And she's like, I agree. So her mom flew out to Denver, kind of packed up her stuff. I went to New York City 4 days later on a more work trip. We hadn't talked in those 4 days. And I look across the street, and there she is on the street corner in New York City randomly with him.
Now, look, the hopeless romantic in me would have thought that was a sign to get back together. Just me. What do I know?
Amanda Stanton from my season. They were doing an event in New York. And you know what I did?
What'd you do? Ran away?
Bolted. Took off the opposite direction.
Get out of there. Get out of there.
Took off the opposite direction.
You're like hood up?
Yeah, gone.
Why?
She was literally across the street in New York. And then I got back to Denver, and her stuff was packed up. And she got so mad at me about this at the time. I think she could laugh about it today. But a lot of the stuff was hers. She had done this deal with like People magazine or something and got like all the furniture in our house. And it was really beautiful. And I showed up, and all the furniture is gone. And so I show up to this little house that's empty with no furniture. And I still had this lawn chair in the back. So I took my lawn chair and I sat in my living room. The TV was left. Turned on the TV, grabbed a bottle of bourbon, sat it on the floor next to me. I was like, this is actually a funny picture. Let me take a picture of this. So I took a picture of it, talked about it on Almost Famous. And because Almost Famous launched the week we broke up. So I had to talk about the breakup on Almost Famous.
That was your like opening episode.
Opening up, and that was not planned.
This is what's so hard, which I laugh when I hear this, because it's like you still have to monetize your story, right? And so it's like, and again, this is advice for anyone out there. Don't give your story away to anybody else. He shares it on his own podcast, which I'm sure gave incredible numbers to his podcast. For the life of me, I'm shocked the podcast still exists, only because I don't feel like it's got too much heart and soul. I could be wrong. It just feels to me like all these shows, and they just feel like Zoom, like shows left over from the pandemic, vestiges of a certain time. I don't know. That's just me. Either way, I mean, they still get the tea. They still print newspapers, and so they're still printing money.
It was literally just some brilliance from above saying this is a good idea. And so I took a picture, and it's the saddest picture in the world. And she got mad, which she should have at the time. That was a dumb thing, because she's like, you made it look like I took everything. I'm like, well, it makes sense. You owned everything. It was yours. It was not mine. It was yours.
Right.
You did
like
it.
she had every right to take
every
everything.
right. There
but
was
she's
no
like, you're making me look bad. Like
you're
I
making me look
left you
terrible.
with
I'm like,
nothing.
Honestly, it does make you look terrible. It makes you look so bad. And again,
with no context, it does. Like, with context, it fully makes sense. But
in context, it makes sense. I was like, I mostly did it because it's a great picture of my life. And so it's just like one chair and a bottle of bourbon and a pint of ice cream.
Jesus.
Like, the funny thing is, like, you were 26 in your house before you're going on The Bachelor, telling yourself you're going to be single forever. A year later, after The Bachelor, you're sitting in your house in a chair, drinking a bottle of bourbon, saying, "I'm going to be single forever."
I'm right back to where I started, guys. I'm not getting any better. Yeah,
but you're still so young, which is crazy.
I mean, that is crazy how young they were. Look, I actually really like Ben Higgins for a lot of reasons. He's actually really good. I just don't think the format works with the Zoom calls. I just think it's so like, it seems like a chore. It seems like we're part of someone's chore, not part of a passion. That's just the vibrancy I get out of it. But it's funny that visual he had about sitting there in a lawn chair. It reminded me of one of my favorite Bill Burr quotes. Realizing that sleeping on a futon when you're 30 is not the worst thing. You know what's worse? Sleeping in a king bed next to a wife you're not really in love with, but for some reason you married and you got a couple kids and you got a job you hate. You'll be laying there fantasizing about sleeping on a futon. There's no risk when you go after a dream. There's a tremendous amount to risk to playing it safe. And again, it doesn't really apply to this situation. They weren't playing it safe. They just did what you do in the Bachelor world, which is cosplay a relationship and see if it works out. As of right now, the success rate is extremely low, to the point where Bachelor in Paradise contestants have a better shot. Not that they're doing that show anymore. Golden Bachelor 0 for 1, Bachelorette 3 for 20, whatever the case may be. It's not good out there as far as, the betting percentage. But hey, what can you do? It's still a fun show to watch. Some of the comments, can he just let her go? Still talking about this, really? They've both moved on and married. Why does he need to talk about this all these years later? Shut the hell up, you idiots. They're talking about it because they make money talking about it. Because it's in people. Because they got to talk about things to get clicks. And then I got to make content about them to get clicks. Why? Because the system doesn't just shut off during the off season. It's barrel scraping season. And we're all here to talk about whatever their names are, Ben Higgins and Lauren Bushnell. Was that too much? All right, folks. Well, you can go check out my podcast, The Rush Hour Podcast. I'll see you guys then. Bye, everyone.